Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling more alone than when it started? Not because of conflict, but because the other person just couldn't meet you. You shared something real, and rather than being received, you got advice, or a story about them, or deflection, or nothing at all. What if I told you that most relationship struggles, romantic, platonic, even spiritual connections, don't begin in incompatibility. They begin right here, at the level of how two people exchange energy through conversation. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the vital importance and characteristics of harmonious conversations. Upon hearing that, you might be wondering, why is it important to focus on conversation skills at all? You might be thinking, I've been conversing since I was 3 years old. Well, just like someone may have been driving a car for 40 years, that doesn't necessarily make them a good driver. You wouldn't necessarily place them on a professional race car track. This is not something any of us were ever taught directly, generally speaking, and most of us just go about conversing with people mindlessly based off of the patterns that we've picked up from early childhood and our early upbringing. Relationships are the biggest area of life that people struggle with, and they define so much of one's life experience. And they all start with the foundation of a basic conversation. The majority of time that we spend with other people is conversing. And pick just about any relationship statistic, particularly in the United States. From my understanding, divorce rates are about 50%, which indicates that there are two people coming together who vow to never separate except through death, generally speaking, and yet they are still separating. Then there are also very high rates of abuse of all kind involving two parties. My guess is these statistics are not exactly the same throughout the world. But generally speaking, these statistics paint a terrible picture of relationship quality in our world. When the state of relationships are what they are, focusing on the basics is worthwhile. You have to master the basics before you can move beyond them. Unfortunately, people just don't know how to connect very well in our culture. And yet, we're starving for connection. We are social creatures. Our literal survival depends on it. And many of us feel confused about why we feel lonely, even in spiritual spaces or communities that focus on personal development. It's because people generally don't know how to have a conversation that isn't self-centered, self-soothing, or energetically extractive. So, let's dive in to what's actually happening within our relationships and how conversations are playing a crucial part of how they unfold. Now, many people think their relationship struggles come from things like past wounding in their childhood, or lack of chemistry, whatever that means, or perhaps value differences. We just value different things. But the real fracture usually starts much earlier, at the level of how we converse, the absolute basics of communication. Some questions to ask are then, why do we feel unseen by other people? Why do seemingly meaningful connections collapse over time? You might have met someone, felt that there was a lot of potential, a very immediate deepening of a connection, but still collapsed over time. Why does that happen? Why do someone you might categorize as spiritually attuned or supposedly highly conscious people still create rupture? Why do we feel drained after talking to certain people? Why does sharing often feel like shouting into a void? I've had many experiences when I've shared things with those who are supposedly very close to me, and I was met with immediate unsolicited advice, questioning, and interrogation, making me think my own truth and decision-making was faulty, or met with total collapse at my attempts at speaking joyfully, leaving me to feel like that hurt, like something must be wrong with me if other people are responding to my joy or the way that I'm conversing with others. So I'm sure everyone has felt one or all of these at some point in their life. Why do these things happen so often? Let's see if we can pinpoint where these pain points often arise. And I'm going to start by sharing what a conversation actually is. this is the type of thing that hardly anyone takes the time to think about. Because, as I mentioned earlier, conversing is so ubiquitous and ingrained in how we operate as humans that it's just generally an afterthought. But I think if we can break it down and actually identify what's actually happening, you might get some clarity on where these ruptures can take place. A conversation is not words. It is an energetic exchange. What is an energetic exchange? How do they operate? Any interaction between two people, two parties, carries an energetic exchange. And that goes to business transactions. They are exchanging energy, whether it's money for services. That is an energetic exchange. To simple conversations. So I'll offer the general mechanics of a conversation, and we'll dive deeper to see where in this mechanic things can break down. Generally speaking, you might initiate the conversation, you start speaking. That is you offering your energy. Then the other party, the other person, receives. They receive or metabolize your energy. The next step then is the other person responds. They return your energy back to you, or they may even deflect that energy or altogether just avoid it. So it is a very simple process of offering energy, metabolizing that energy, sending it back, or deflecting and avoiding. What do most people want in any energetic exchange? They want harmony. For a conversation or any energetic exchange to be harmonious, it requires things like reciprocity, flow, balance, and moving towards equilibrium. A conversation, however, that is disharmonious has things like blockage, hijack, collapse, redirection, and self-centering. You cannot have a harmonious connection with someone who cannot have a harmonious conversation with you. A harmonious relationship carries all of the harmonious qualities that I mentioned. So it must carry forward into all types of interactions, like the one that you have most often with someone else, which is literally just talking to them. So now that we understand that conversations are an energetic exchange, I will name some common examples of disharmonious conversational patterns and why they are disharmonious from an energetic standpoint. Perhaps the most common one is simply interrupting. This, from an energetic standpoint, is the equivalent of abruptly stopping that flow of energy. That is pure disharmony. Of course, there are times when interrupting may be appropriate. For example, if someone else is engaging while they're speaking in other disharmonious patterns, if they are attacking you and you're not willing to tolerate that, it may be appropriate to interrupt that flow. But generally speaking, if someone is being kind and generous and honest, interrupting is stopping that flow of natural energy. Then we have things like dominating the conversation. That is the equivalent of taking all of the energy for oneself. Sucking the air out of the room could be the metaphor of that experience. Then we have giving unsolicited advice. Unsolicited advice always fails because you are being fixed rather than understood. This can arise possibly due to insecurity from the other person, in that they sense something isn't okay and they want that discomfort to disappear. And the best way to do that is to try to solve the problem. It also highlights an inability to just receive the energy, to receive the message that was offered. Like I just mentioned in the basic mechanics, that is redirecting that energy. And this, as I mentioned, taking this a step forward, fixing instead of receiving doesn't always have to imply giving advice, but generally this is a pattern that indicates that the energy has not been adequately metabolized. If you offer someone and they immediately try to fix, they haven't sat with it. It hasn't been properly metabolized. And this indicates generally that you don't feel seen and you may feel like something is wrong with you based off of that response. Another disharmonious pattern is making a share about themselves. So that is the equivalent of, swallowing up the energy without giving anything back. There's no reciprocity. Next, we have energetic extraction, perhaps using your share for that person to then self-soothe. For example, taking credit for your share or sharing how they've done the same. That is literally energy, extracting your energy that you just offered, taking it for themselves. I've had experiences where I shared a positive thing that I had achieved, trying to celebrate with someone else, invite them into my celebration, only to have someone's first response be how they achieved something similar, essentially extracting from my story to glorify themselves. Next, we have avoiding discomfort by redirecting the conversation. This is the equivalent of deflecting that energy. Sometimes just sharing something makes people uncomfortable. They want to leave that immediately and deflect the energy. We also have dismissing or minimizing what you offered in your conversation. This is the equivalent of reducing the energy offered, which equates to you not being fully seen or fully met or fully received. Then we have what can be called spiritual bypassing or just bypassing, emotional bypassing. This can be said also as offering things like platitudes, such as everything happens for a reason or you'll get over it. That is another way of deflecting or minimizing the energy that was offered in your original message. Then we have listening only to respond. Many people, when they're engaging with others, want to advise and feel smart in their conversations rather than to actually create a meaningful connection. For some people, there's nothing to gain on the surface by truly just listening and being present. This, again, is a type of energetic extraction. They're waiting for their opportunity to present themselves as intellectually competent. They're using your share as fuel for their ego. Then we have shame-driven defensiveness. This is a way to hijack a conversation. For example, if you share something and someone immediately gets defensive, that's a way to completely redirect everything and sometimes direct it back to you, but with harm. So this is basically taking energy from a completely different direction, and it's the equivalent of basically access denied and return to sender, but with harm. Not a harmonious energetic flow there. Then we have emotional invalidation. Someone basically telling you that you're wrong to feel that way. That is, again, equivalent to blocking your energy and, again, returning to sender with harm. Lastly, we have the pattern of overwhelming someone. I have done this many times myself, where I realized I shared or gave advice beyond what a person was ready for or was needing to hear. Basically, this is now too much energy being returned back to the person in a disharmonious manner. So, these are the most common examples of disharmonious conversation patterns. And here is perhaps a spiritual shadow. Even advanced, mature, high-frequency people often cannot hold another person's share without collapsing into their own discomfort. Holding genuine presence can simply just be too much for people. What can happen is your success can reveal others' insecurity. Your certainty can reveal others' doubt. Your joy can trigger others' misery. Your vulnerability can trigger others' shame. All of these can happen at the level of a simple conversation. Now, why do these conversation patterns hurt so much? What are the real wounds that these patterns are creating? To put it simply, sharing really anything opens yourself up vulnerably. When you open yourself up vulnerably, this allows access for someone to create wounding. For example, when you are not being received, if you're not being seen or fully met, that is the equivalent of you wasting energy. People don't like to waste energy of any kind, generally speaking. When you are receiving advice, especially when you did not ask for it, that is the equivalent of being misattuned. You've been misread, misjudged. And oftentimes it might make you feel like you're in need of fixing, like there's something wrong with you, that there are implications that you have things to be ashamed or guilty of. You did something wrong, you have poor decision-making skills. People generally give themselves the benefit of the doubt, and they believe that they do their best given the circumstances that they operate in and with the information that they had available to them at the time. So if you are receiving advice based off of your situation, when you're generally thinking you did the best that you could, that is essentially proving the exact opposite. Like you did or are something wrong. And no one ever wants to feel that they, as a human being, are wrong. If you receive deflection, this implies that you don't matter, or what you shared does not matter. And again, doubly compounding with the fact that you wasted energy. People don't like that. When you share something and another person makes it about themselves, that is the equivalent of relational collapse. Someone is extracting from you. It is no longer a partnership at that moment. It is now about that other person entirely, and is the equivalent of them stealing from you. Not only did you waste energy, but it was actively taken from you. People don't like that. Simply put, speaking vulnerably and receiving invalidation is the equivalent of shouting into a void, then being hit on the way back. It's doubly painful because, again, you've not only wasted your own energy, but then you're being overloaded with someone else's. And people walk away confused as to why connection doesn't grow. These are the reasons why. Through conversations, people are being hurt. Most relationships fail not from conflict, but in conversation. So, I think I've shared the problems well enough. Let's talk about how to actually converse in a harmonious manner. What actually makes for harmonious conversations? I will repeat the mechanic again. Conversations are an energy exchange. For an energy exchange to be harmonious, it must be a balanced exchange. In general, thinking in the terms of something like 50% receiving energy and 50% giving energy in a natural rhythm, not anything that's feeling forced, like you're trying to quantify if I'm giving too much, receiving too little. It wants to feel natural in a way that feels mutual, not necessarily mechanical or transactional, keeping tabs of, wait, I gave 50%, nothing of the sort. It wants to feel natural, but generally speaking, feel balanced and mutual, to where essentially also giving the account that some people are just naturally a bit more long-winded, they're more explanatory, other people might be more direct, as long as the key points are delivered from both sides in an equal manner, regardless of how verbose someone might be, it will feel balanced. So now, I will share some more basic mechanics and patterns of harmonious conversations. Starting with reflection before response. You can literally stop to reflect, to gather your thoughts. Empty space in a conversation is allowed. And it might be counterintuitive, but it's actually showing the other person that you're being thoughtful and you care for how to respond, and you care for the other person and how you want your words to land for that other person. It's showing very deep care for the other person, that you're taking time to consider, how are my words going to land for this person? I'm going to take some time for this. Next, acknowledgement before analysis. This is how people feel received. You can say things like, thank you for sharing. That must have been tough. Or, I'm really impressed with how you handled that. So on and so forth. If you just go straight into analyzing the situation, they have not felt received. They don't feel like you actually understand what they're talking about. Next, we have asking before advising. I'm going to be very clear about this. No one has ever received unsolicited advice that actually helps them. That is a 100% scientifically proven fact. Just kidding, of course. But if you feel like you have something that you think would be genuinely beneficial to offer, ask if they want to receive it. The fact that you cared enough to ask, rather than just forcing it onto somebody, will likely make them open up to you, for the very fact that, again, you showed that you have care for their own decision-making. You have care for their autonomy and their sovereignty. This is especially potent if you reflected and acknowledged in a very robust manner, because, again, it shows that you received them. You metabolized the fullness of what they shared and what they are experiencing and going through. Then they will see your advice as coming from a good place, instead of trying to fix them and avoiding meeting them. It'll actually feel like you've met them. Now you want to help as opposed to you're avoiding them and wanting to assert yourself. If someone does that, that type of person usually will have very good advice to share because they've shown that they've actually fully understood your situation. Next, we have inviting before monologuing. You might have a lot to say, even if it's not advice. So perhaps inviting someone along this longer share with you. Hey, can I share my take? Or I have some thoughts. If you're open to hearing about them, are you open to hearing about them? This is especially important when you'd like to bring something forward about someone else's behavior that you're hoping to have them change. So you want to invite them in as opposed to just coming in on the attack mode. That immediately puts somebody on the defensive. You want to, again, make it a conversation, an actual energetically participatory experience rather than you just launching at the person. Next, we have pausing before redirecting. Let the energy or the other person complete before taking the wheel and switching directions. You can ask things like, are you finished with this thread? Or I'd like to talk about something else. Do you feel complete in your share? This shows that you are honoring the other person and allowing them to fully express themselves until they feel fully received. Next, listening to feel, not to reply. You want to show that you actually want to be with the other person instead of trying to get something from them. People can tell when you're thinking of what to say next and you're not present. And that shows again that you're not receiving the person. You're not engaged. Next, holding discomfort without trying to fix it. This perhaps can be one of the most hardest things for people to do, to just sit with someone in their discomfort. And as a follow-up, it's okay to not know how to respond. You are allowed to not know how to respond. You can just be honest and tell the truth. You can say something like, this is hard for me to hear. This makes me feel uncomfortable. I actually don't have any experience in what you just shared, but I'm with you and I support you. I actually may not be the best person suited to receive you fully in this, but how can I help? What do you need from me? That is a truthful response where the other person will likely not be upset with you for the fact that you couldn't receive them because you were honest, that you actually couldn't meet them. So honesty is allowed. Next, staying with the other person's energy instead of running from it. Of course, without martyring yourself or allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. But again, it's just about being with the person on their same energetic bandwidth. Instead of, again, highlighting that last example I just shared, that was an opportunity to just be with the person without just running and hiding. Lastly, this is possibly the most important and ubiquitous point or pattern of them all. Simply being present. This is the simplest yet perhaps most potent thing that aligns with every other harmonious pattern. Just be present without trying to make it all about you. You'll be surprised at how much people will appreciate you just because you're genuinely present. They will feel you being there with them. Doing things like holding eye contact while you listen, nodding at appropriate times, or making appropriate facial gestures and responses. That shows that you are engaged. Just showing that you care, even if you say almost nothing, even if you feel like you have nothing to offer to their experience. People will feel your presence. If someone follows these patterns with you, you might even realize that you have literally nothing in common with this person on the surface, but you will feel a deep connection with them, even if for just the time of your conversation. I've had friendships where the other person didn't have the same external life experiences as I was having, but they listened and cared deeply about me and could reflect back to me that they understood me on an emotional level, if not necessarily on a circumstantial level. And we would have conversations that would last for hours because our conversations were deeply nourishing. Now that we went through what makes conversations harmonious, do you see how important this is? Can you see how this is the foundation of all relationships? Without conversational harmony, intimacy cannot form. Without energetic receptivity, trust cannot grow. without reciprocity, one person will inflate, the other person will collapse. Without attunement, the nervous system cannot settle. You'll always feel on guard with someone. And without safety, the heart cannot open. No one will open up to you deeper if they don't feel safe opening up in the simplest form of connection. And without presence, there is no connection. People in the personal development space love talking about things like masculine and feminine polarity, attachment styles, or even love languages. All of what we talked about here is the prerequisite for all of those things. Not communication tips, not boundaries, not attachment theory. The core truth is this: if two people cannot exchange energy harmoniously, no relationship, romantic or platonic, can flourish. I've had many people with whom I have shared my truth, exactly what was happening in my life, exactly as it happened, and how I felt about it, the exact pure truth of how I felt about it. And the other people could literally not receive that truth without engaging in the disharmonious patterns that I mentioned earlier, meaning that I couldn't go any further in deepening a connection with these people. I reached the ceiling of our potential, which meant the obvious truth was revealed. There is no deeply meaningful connection that could be had. If you only have a certain bandwidth that you can reach with someone else, it will never be completely fulfilling. And it becomes easily apparent at the level of just basic conversation. So let's put all of this together. I'll offer a bit of a summary and just some gentle reminder practices to keep in mind for your conversations going forward. And I'll offer again some energetic frameworks here. So when you're engaging in conversation, again, thinking about harmonious, balanced, equilibrium, perhaps keeping the pattern of reflecting 50% of the time, sharing 50% of the time when it's your turn to engage. For example, an appropriate level of acknowledgement and reflection that corresponds to how long the other person shared is appropriate. So if someone shares for 10 minutes very deeply, just pouring their soul out, very deeply intimate share, and you only reflect for 10 seconds, it's probably not going to land for the other person. It's showing that you're not in sync. So there wants to be an equal amount of reflection and acknowledgement from what the other person shared before you share an equal amount of your take on the matter. Next, ask if the other person wants advice before offering it. Wait for a clear yes. Some people don't want your advice, no matter how good you think it is. Respect their free will choice. Allow people to make their own decisions, uninfluenced, if they want to. Next, feel them, don't analyze them. No one wants to be dissected or feel like they're being interrogated or interviewed, which then means participation is also generally necessary beyond just asking questions. Otherwise, it feels like you're not very present with the person. Ideally, mirror their emotional truth, not just the literal words. See if you can identify what the person actually wants. Oftentimes it might just be they just want to be listened to. They want to be seen or validated, or at least just feel that they're not crazy with what they're navigating in their life. And you don't need to say anything that's untruthful or to stoke another person's ego just to make them feel better. But sometimes just simple kindness and warmth is really all someone wants in an interaction. Next, slow the pace. Get present and get out of your head. This takes practice. Generally, we're oftentimes thinking, what am I going to say next? And when you do, if you start to engage in this pattern of being really present, focusing on what the other person is saying, you might realize that you have empty space in your conversations because you realize, I don't know what I was going to say next. I need to think of what I'm going to say. This might also make your conversations less efficient. They might take longer because you're really present. Then you need to take time in a linear fashion of they shared, you listened, pause, think, then say. Like, that's not very efficient in theory. But that is okay because it's showing that you care and are actually present with the other person. With that, let pauses be part of the connection. Talking isn't always required. It has been said that music is the space between the notes. If you're constantly talking, eventually it just sounds like noise. Don't force direction. If you're truly present, the conversation will evolve organically. This creates flow. Next, wait for invitations to deepen. Not everyone is ready to go as deep as you might be. This is a sign of respect for the other person's energetic capacity, boundaries, and sovereignty. You're not trying to force something on them that they may not be ready for. Lastly, again, you can admit if you don't know how to respond. You can admit you feel uncomfortable. That is okay, because it's honest. People will appreciate that you're actually just telling the truth and you're being genuinely honest. If someone who says that, it might have this completely counterintuitive impact, and they might trust you more because you said something that might make you feel vulnerable, because we have this pattern in our society that we feel like we always have to know the answer. And if you just admit to the other person that I don't have the answer, like that might make them trust you more, because why would you ever admit your own fault? Don't be surprised at how potent of just saying, like, I just being honest here, I don't know how I can help you here, or I don't know how to respond. In closing, as you can see, this goes way deeper than communication skills. This is the energetic foundation for relationship architecture. This is about energetic maturity. So what I'm actually pointing to is the energetic competency required for high-frequency relationships. These types of relationships begin with energetic maturity. We are moving through a collective shift in consciousness. We cannot unify as a species if we cannot harmonize in simple conversation. It's in these environments where our consciousness is gauged. Connection begins in the smallest exchange. So it's worth giving it the care it deserves. That wraps up this video on harmonious conversations. If you are navigating relationship strife or rupture, or hoping to remove blocks, having the relationships you desire for yourself, and align yourself with harmonious connections, I do offer one-on-one support in these exact areas. I invite you to check out the website in the description. I'd be honored to support you in any way that I can. And if this video resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone that you want a deeper connection with. This is how new Earth relationships begin, one conversation at a time. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.